welcome. And as you know, these are the students who are going to attempt for 2021 CLAT PG and various PG exams. So they want to hear from you how to utilize the maximum during this lockdown phase because you also face the same situation last year and this situation is not new to you, and they also want to grab more learning from your preparation strategies and prioritize. So please guide them.
Okay, guys. So basically, I'll deal with 3 points. As sir asked me to deal with 3 points. Firstly, how COVID affected my preparation, and like basically how I utilized that opportunity in a positive manner to improve my preparation strategy, and then how is the LLM system going during this pandemic? Like, what is the virtual experience that we are facing? And thirdly, how to like change your plan according to this your exam is getting postponed and there is stress everywhere. So firstly, when it comes to how to like prepare during this pandemic and as things are getting postponed, I'll tell you how I prepared. So basically, I planned to pursue LLM only in the month of January when the exam was scheduled for the month of May. So I didn't take much time. Wait. Sure, I'll share my online teaching and experience in LSI as well. So apart from those things, I was not planning to do LLM before January, so I didn't plan to prepare for more than like 3 months. But due to COVID, the exam actually happened in the month of September. So basically, how I changed my strategies in the as per the new syllabus, you guys know that you cannot be sure about what will come in exam, and you will have to have the knowledge of each and every subject, and mostly all of the legal subjects. So basically, the goal as per the new pattern is not to cover the certain number of subjects or certain things, but to make your knowledge base more broad. Basically, you will as broad as you can. So if you will have more knowledge about all of the legal subjects, recent cases, old cases, recent changes, all of that will help, because you cannot predict how the exam will be and what are the questions that will be asked. Yes, some things need to be prioritized, like constitutional law, jurisprudence. These things need to be prioritized, but as per the new syllabus, you cannot be sure that what is it that they will ask you in the exam. So the goal here is to make your knowledge base more broad. So as much as you can learn in this time for preparation, that would be good. So for example, initially you plan to study for 3 months and cover certain things within that time. So now your exam got postponed. What I did, and you guys can also approach the exam in the same way, is to change your plan. I'm pretty sure that most of you will be following a plan like I used to do. So for example, I used to make a plan where I used to plan that in 15 days I need to cover these amount of judgments and that many subjects and attempt that many mocks. So that's how I used to plan, and by end of this date I will start my revision. So that's how I used to plan. And whenever the exam got postponed, I just changed my plan a bit. Like as we got extra time, I can now prepare more judgments, I can study more subjects and attempt more mocks and start my revision instead of this date to a later date. And also the revision can take place more than once also. So you guys can do the same. Now the exam has been postponed, so just change your plan, try to cover more things, try to read more judgments, try to read more concepts and recent changes. And if you are planning to just revise the syllabus once, try to revise it twice. So the main thing is you should have a plan, and that plan should be something like this, that every day I will cover this amount of syllabus, and that should be dependent on the last date till which you want to cover syllabus, and then you have to start your revision. So just make such a plan and follow it, and because of the postponement you can read more amount of things, and that will help you, even if the exam will be unexpected, and it will be unexpected for everyone, but if you will have a broader data base of knowledge, then I think you will score higher than other people. So that is how I think you should use this time to like positively change your approach. And some of you might be facing mental stress because of the pandemic, and it happens, and you should not beat yourself for it, like I'm not productive enough, or I'm not doing enough and other people are doing enough. It's okay to take a break if the situation is too grim and you are not being able to like study that much. It's okay. You don't have to run with everyone in the rat race. Just take a break, and just make sure that once your mental state is stable enough, you get back to the track, like you get back to your preparation. If you have decided to go for CLAT, LLM, or any other LLM exam, you should not just leave it all together in between. If the situation gets bad, then you can take a break, and it's okay to take a break. Don't have to be too stressed about it. Everyone does that. Even I used to take a break. Like whenever the exam got postponed, I used to just not study for weeks, for an entire week, not study at all. But I won't like recommend you the same approach, but I'm telling you my experience. But after that week, I used to get back to my preparation with like full dedication. So that's how I function. So basically it's okay if you are feeling that way. Please share your daily routine during lockdown. Okay, so my routine is kind of funny. I don't think you other guys will appreciate it, because like I study at night time only. I wake up at around I used to wake up around 3 p.m. and after that I used to like do like my lunch and breakfast, whatever you call it, and then after that I used to do my workout for 2 hours, and by that time then I will freshen up, and that at 8 p.m. I used to start my preparation. Or so at 8 p.m. I will study for 1 hour or 1.5 hours. Then I will do some recreational thing, and then again I start my studies for 1 hour and 1.5 hours. Then again I take a break for half an hour, and this process I used to repeat for till like 5 a.m. in the morning. So, and then I sleep till 3 p.m. So
okay, so we can get a gist from that a longer or the longer study is not needed for preparation. You can take a small break during the studies.
Exactly, sir. I think that is an approach. I think I've read a paper on it, that if you'll study for a shorter duration with the more frequent breaks, it will be more beneficial compared to a longer period of study, because your brain stops functioning to a certain extent after a certain period of time. So if you like study for an hour and then take a break and then get back to it, then it will function more. And I follow that approach even now. I'll study for 2 hours straight. I'll keep my phone aside. I'll get away from all the distractions, and just put on some music, and then I'll take a break for half an hour and then get back to it. So that's how I go about studying. So I think
So
you guys.
Sahil, tell
Yes.
us about like which subjects you prioritize during the lockdown.
Okay.
That
Yes, sir. I can tell you that. So basically, there are some subjects that I was interested in, but they were not of the highest priority, like the company law and etc. Because I was interested in, I used to read cases of company law, anyways. But as far as my understanding goes, as I observed the pattern and everything, constitutional law and jurisprudence, and then Indian Penal Code, contracts, torts, and international law to a certain extent, and family law. So these are I think 7 subjects that are more important, because earlier the pattern used to be, of the CLAT exam used to be based on these subjects alone. So obviously the things will not change altogether, and these subjects still hold more priority compared to the other subjects. But so these are the subjects that you should first cover first and prioritize. After that, you can go about studying the other subjects also, like labor law and taxation and company law, etc., IPR, etc. And so someone asked me a question about the experience of online teaching in LSIU. So I'll tell you, the online experience is no different than the offline experience. I would say, I don't know about the offline experience at NLSIU, because we were never able to visit campus and take that experience in NLSIU. But I'll compare it from my experience in DSNLU. So I don't think there's any difference. One difference can be, you can skip classes if you are not serious enough. You can just put on the classes and not attend it. But that also does not work in NLSIU in many cases, because recently, like Sudhir sir, who is the VCO, Vice Chancellor of NLSIU, used to take classes. He used to take names of each and every student very frequently, like Sahil, you should read this passage and tell us what the author means. So he will point that out. He'll ask directly, and if we won't respond, then there were marks for class participation as well. So basically, and also the online experience has become more hectic, is what I would say, because there was no compromise on quality in LSIU, and there were so many assignments that we had to complete. Even yesterday, there was a deadline for all of the assignments, and then examination was also not that easy. So I'd say learning experience was even better than physical classes for me personally, because I had to take part in all of the classes, and classes were really long, and long discussions. So much of knowledge was passed on to us in the online classes, and we had to read it all in order to pass also. So I think the online experience was even better than the offline experience in terms of teaching. But if you say in terms of concentration and in terms of how a student cope up with all of this pressure, in offline scenario, when you are at campus, you can cope up with all of the work pressure in a better way. But that you sometimes cannot cope up with all of the hectic pressure or of the coursework in online scenario. So that is a different experience, I would say. And what other questions are there? Until when exams will be conducted? Exams of what, CLAT?
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure about that, Yogini, until because I'm not following online these entrance exams. How will NLU conduct placements? Okay, so I think many people have doubt about placements. I'll tell you about placements. See, basically, NLU's tell you about placements. See, basically, NLU's top NLUs, as far as I know, including NLSIU, don't really focus on placement for LLM students. They don't really like go out of way to get you placed. They will facilitate you by asking you to form a RCC, recruitment coordination cell, and that will be a student body only, and students can themselves call people to recruit them. But in the end, I don't think RCCs are able to get many people placed. And same is the scenario in LSIU. There's not a lot of campus placement for LM students. It's almost negligible. And even this year, there was few companies, but none of them were interested enough to hire people. So I would say that if you are looking for direct placement from campus, yeah, basically, Arushi, you will be able to get placed based on your own experience and own knowledge. Once you'll be able to complete the LLM, now you will be confident enough to get placed in, so for example, whichever field of work that you're looking for, like if you're looking to become an academician and teach at certain universities, or if you are looking for getting placed in law firms. So after completing the LLM, you yourself will feel confident enough that you can try yourself. But yeah, if you just right away want to get placed with help of the college, that does not happen. So if you are looking for that, I don't think that will happen. So that is one drawback, I would say. Because if compared to LLB students who are there, LLB students get priority in placements because they have been studying in the same college for 5 years, and RCCA for LLB students work day and night to get them placed. But for LLM, there is so much of coursework, and then other things are also there. So the placements take the second place. Okay, what other questions are there? Academic opportunities during LLM course in NLS. During the course, there are internships, and after LLM, there you can become TAs, teaching assistant, teacher, and please tell us about academic course. Research work preferred. Is research work preferred? Do they cooperate? Can you be more clear about what do you mean by what is the cooperation you are talking about? Any strategies or ideas or method to follow for improving objective part? Which, yeah, for objective part, I would say, Nishi, that I used to practice a lot for objective part. So the strategy, I would say, there are few strategies. Firstly, whenever you approach, whenever you practice writing an answer for an objective question, like don't read about that before writing the question, before writing your answer. So first write your answer based on your own knowledge, whatever knowledge you have, just write it. Okay, then you afterwards you can read it and then again write it if for your satisfaction. So if you'll write it without reading the answer, without reading on the concept, you will know that how well you can answer a concept that you have no knowledge about, or you have few like not that much of knowledge about. If you'll just read and then write, then you are just reproducing whatever you have read just before writing the answer. So basically I'll suggest that don't read anything on the topic and practice a lot. I used to practice writing essays every weekend, like 2 essays per week. I think many of you are not doing that much for objective questions, as far as I have observed my friends that who are trying to be for CLAT LLM. So I would say that writing objective answer, practicing objective answer is very important, and you should not skip it. You should practice writing at least 2 objective answers every week and keep on improving it. After writing, also read up on the topic and see how you could have improved. And if you want me to like discuss the entire pattern of how you should write answer, so sir can tell me if he wants me to discuss the entire pattern, then that will be a long discussion. What website or web pages you use to read? Okay, so website are Live Law and Bar and Bench are the 2 websites, I think, which cover basically most of the legal news. And there is SC Observer also for recent cases, the summary of recent cases. So that also you can check. What topic you can suggest to exam to be covered and important according to you? Not there are not specific topics, Anshul. I think that recent topics which you think are of importance in legal sense are all important. So I cannot suggest any individual topic to you because all of the topics are important if it is related to any legal change. Any book suggestions? Okay, so for book, I would say that you can have a LLM guide, universal guide for LLM to start your preparation. So cover the basics, and then when you gradually move forward, you can read Constitution from the commentaries on Constitution. Like I used to read from PM Bakshi, and for jurisprudence also, you can take a specific book dedicated to jurisprudence. Okay, there are many books, so it's on you to decide which book you want to read or not. And in the end, I'll say that other than 2-3 books, you don't need a lot of books, because if you read cases, if you read recent changes, I think that, and Bare Acts, but don't directly read Bare Acts. I would not suggest you to climb up the provisions just for your understanding. So I think that would be enough for your preparation, and you don't need any more books other than that. Is it possible to prepare for other competitive exams along with pursuing LLM in a... Okay, so Meeta, do you mean judiciary? If you mean judiciary, then it's possible, but as far as I have observed, the coursework is too hectic, and they constantly put you on your toes, keep you on your toes, and you will be overwhelmed with all of the coursework and the assignments. But yes, it's possible. If you are a hardworking student, you can prepare for judiciary and other competitive exams on the side. So, and also it depends on NLUs. And you are talking about top-notch NLUs, as I told you, the coursework for LLM specifically is really hectic in top NLUs. So it will be hard, but yes, you can do anything if you put the hard work into it. Considering the plethora of syllabus, how can we restrict to a final list of judgments? Okay, so Manvendra, if you want to narrow down the important judgments, so they're based on 2 criteria, you can narrow it down even further. Or whatever list you have made, you can narrow it down based on 2 criteria. And lastly, you have yourself to decide that how many cases I personally can cover, what is my caliber. That is the 3rd criteria. So the 2 criteria are, you have to see if the judgment is laying down a new position of law or changing a position of law. And secondly, what is the strength of the bench? Because if the strength is of 5-judge bench or 3-judge bench, it becomes more important compared to a division bench. But that's not always the case. But these are the 2 criteria on the basis of which you can narrow down your reading of judgments, list of judgments. Okay, did you read the entire judgment, or would you focus on the certain? How can we identify such a... Okay, Akash, when it comes to judgment, you don't have to read the entire judgment. According to me, you can leave the arguments of the lawyers or counsels. Other than that, I think you should read the entire judgment. But when it comes to reading the judgment, there is a strategy where you just skim through some parts and focus particularly on other parts. So there are some observations. Sometimes what judges do, they will reproduce a lot of cases to just prove the same point. Okay. So recently there was a judgment on section 138 being declared as quasi-criminal provision, and the moratorium will apply on section 138 as well. So in that judgment, in order to prove that it's quasi-criminal, Supreme Court laid down a list of cases for like 30 pages on quasi-criminal provisions. So I think you can skip all of that and just come directly and see on what basis they are saying that section 138 is also quasi-criminal, and focus on that part, highlight that part, and other parts you can just skim through it. Please tell your personal strategy for reading the judgments. I think I just covered that. What was my strategy for reading the judgments? Reliability of summaries from live law and bar and match. They can see when it comes to summaries. No, you can just look at them for the initial expression of the judgment, what judgment is about, and or for the final revision if you are forgetting what judgment was about. But if you want to be sure about the questions that you need to answer in the exam, you need to read the judgment yourself, because you cannot solely rely on the summaries from live law or bar and bench. Okay, so I think that covers all of the questions. Okay, how many judgments do you cover? I think I covered around 100 judgments in detail and around 250 judgments overall. What is CLAT likely to ask most, landmark or recent? Mostly recent cases, I think, because they are concerned with they want to check if students are up to date with the recent changes or not. But I think you cannot even, I think you can just skip all of that and just come directly and see on what basis they are saying that section 138 is also quasi-criminal, and the moratorium will apply on section 138 as well. So I think you cannot even like ignore the landmark parts also, landmark judgments also. So focus more on recent cases and cover landmark cases as well. That's what I did. I had a book where there was landmark cases of from 1950 till 2020. So there was summary of those cases. So I read those cases, and some cases I read in detail also, landmark cases also, but not all of them. But recent cases, yeah, I did cover recent cases in detail for at least past 4 years. You got how much marks to attain 75 rank? I think my marks were around 76. I have 76.5. I have to check, because last year people got less marks. So with 76 marks only, I got rank 5. I have to check actually. I don't exactly remember my marks, but it was around that only. Any possibility of subjective part this year? I think that, Manvendra, I think that situation is improving when it comes to COVID, and I think slowly states will be unlocking now, and physical exam will become a possibility. So yeah, there is high possibility of subjective part this year. They don't want to scrape it off just like that. So if there will be unlocked now, then subjective part will be included in the exam. So you should prepare accordingly. So for landmark judgment, the digestive book you mentioned, or we will have to read those older judgments too. Yeah, I do have that digestive book. I don't remember the case, but yeah, you can, for landmark judgments, you can read summaries, Ritu. That would be a good approach. But for some cases that are very important, no, for those cases, and that can be covered directly from the judgment, you can refer to judgment. But first, cover recent cases entirely from the judgment, and then focus on the landmark cases. Otherwise, if you don't have enough time, then just read the summary for landmark cases and not the entire judgment. That's what I would suggest, Ritu. Okay, so if that covers all of the questions, I'll have to see what other questions that I had to answer as per Akhilesh sir. Okay, how sir, do you want me to discuss how did I change my plan accordingly? I think I have discussed that, how I changed my plan.
Okay, Sahil, just give an example. While reading you judgment, जब भी आप किसी केस को पढ़ते हो, उसमें क्या क्या चीज जो इम्पोर्टेंट है, या कोई केस अगर आप पढ़े अभी रिसेंटली, या कोई भी अपने लास्ट एक अगर ट्रिपल तलाक आपने पढ़ा, तो ट्रिपल तलाक में आपने क्या क्या इम्पोर्टेंट चीज नोट किया जो कि एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है? Give just an example within a case.
Okay, sir. Can I like discuss the recent case that I was talking about earlier, related to section 130? Talking about earlier, related to section 138. Okay, so I recently read this case, Mohan Raj versus ISPAT Limited. It was on basically whether moratorium under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code should apply on section 138 of NI Act, that is check bouncing cases, or whether check bounces cases should be included, and there should be a stay on check bouncing cases as well. So basically that was the entire issue. And if you will not include check bounce cases in the moratorium, then the assets of the company will be depleted, and that is not the objective of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. They want to preserve the assets of the company so that they can be later on distributed to the creditors, and maximize the value of the assets so that the collective interest of all the creditors can be satisfied instead of individual creditors. So that is the purpose. So how court approached, how court went on to discuss the provision in this judgment was, instead of like directly going to whether moratorium would cover criminal and civil cases both, or whether it will cover only civil cases, what court did was to declare section 138 of NI Act as a quasi-criminal provision instead of criminal. I think you all must have a basic idea that section 138 is a criminal provision when there is a check bounce case, and there are criminal courts are flooded with the check bounce cases. So it's a criminal provision. But for the purpose of moratorium, what Supreme Court did was to declare it as quasi-criminal, looking at how various aspects of the provisions are on civil side, how the primary focus of the provision is to recover the money instead of punishing the person who was not able to pay, who committed the default. So basically, when the judgment was very well drafted, because RF Nariman was the author of the judgment, and he drafts his judgments very eloquently. So what are the important parts? I would say the arguments, as I used to skip the arguments, because according to me, judges anyways will discuss everything that has been discussed in the argument if it is important enough. If there was an argument that was raised and it's important enough, then judges will discuss that during their when they are laying their obiter. So you can skip the arguments part, and if you skip the arguments, you can skip like around 30-40 pages of the judgments, and in that way you can cover more judgment instead of focusing on each and every part of the judgment. So once you skip the argument parts, then comes if there is a good judge, he will lay down certain heads, and he will give some introduction for a particular head, and then he will go on like backing his argument with help of cases or reports and everything. So what you guys have to do is see what is it that the judge is trying to discuss in this heading. Okay, so what is the essence of his argument in this heading? Then what are the important cases? If he's like reproducing 10 cases to prove his point, all of those 10 cases are not important at all. If he has reproduced a constitutional bench case and he has relied a lot on that case, then it becomes important. So you should note it down that the judge relied on this constitutional bench case to prove his point. And then if he's relying on committees, for example, Malimat committee, on any other committee, Shukla committee, so you should note that down also, because that can be asked in the exam. That also becomes very important. And then after reading all of these reproductions of different judgments, in end of that point, judge will come down to what he's trying to say, what he's trying to prove in his own words. So read that part very carefully. In that part, you will find the essence of the judgment, the main obiter, what the judge is trying to say. So that part becomes the most important part of the judgment. If the case reproduced is important enough, he will reproduce it in that part also, in the part where he himself is trying to argue and prove like what he's trying to say is trying to prove. In that part, he will reproduce that judgment again. So you will know that it is the most important judgment in the case. So like this, there are 3-4 headings which judges give in their judgments on different points, on different issues. So this is how you read the headings, and then you make notes. In the end of the judgment, in most of the judgments, not all of them, there is a conclusion part also of all of the holdings. That becomes the holding of the judgment, that becomes the judgment. So that also is very important. You should read that very carefully. So the first part becomes the obiter, and the last part, the conclusion part, becomes the ratio of the judgment. So I told you how to read the obiter. You have to identify what is it that judge is trying to argue. What are the main argument? How is he trying to prove the main argument? What are the sources that he's relying on? The main sources, and in the end, what is the conclusion that he's drawing? So that is how you read the obiter of the case. And then when it comes to the ratio of the case, you have to read that entirely, and remember that this was the ratio that was laid down in the case. So this is how you, so sir, should we read the, yes, you can read the concurrent judgments also, because sometimes in the concurrent judgments, they approach the same point with entirely different perspectives. Sometimes they just reproduce the same things. That also happens. But usually when judges write a concurrent judgment, they want to approach the same point, reach to the same conclusion with an entirely different perspective. So you should know that what is that perspective that the other judge is trying to lay down. So and the dissenting judgments are even more important. So you should read concurrent and dissenting judgments. So as far as the case I was talking about, in this case, there were various obiters that were laid down. Like they left the question whether moratorium would cover criminal cases or not wide open. They did not answer that. this so this question is still not answered, but the ratio that was laid down is that section 138 is a quasi criminal proceeding, and as if will not cover this provision under moratorium, it will go against the objective of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. So this was the main ratio. So I have identified what was the obiter. There are other obiters also, how they made the scope of the term proceedings very wide, that it will cover a lot of cases. It will even cover arbitration proceedings and all of these things. So these were the obiters that were laid down, and the ratio, as I told you, I think I don't need to repeat that again. If any one of you have read that case, it's important, judgment of 2020, you should read it. So if any one of you have read the case, I think you got what I'm trying to say. Okay, what other questions are there? Within the obiter, should we concentrate only on constitutional bench judgments? No, Harita, I was giving an example of how judges sometimes rely on constitutional bench judgment to prove their point. What I am trying to say is that there will be few judgments that becomes the backbone of their argument. For example, when you go for a moot court competition, you find a judgment that directly applies to what you are trying to argue. Similar thing happens when judges write the judgments. They rely on few cases directly, on the basis of which they lays down their judgment, and then they will write other cases also, just to like even strengthen their point even further. But that one case, even it need not be constitutional bench judgment, but as I told you, that sometimes constitutional bench judgments become more important because Supreme Court relies on constitutional bench judgments a lot. So in whichever case they are relying upon, just make sure that that case is the backbone of the argument that the judge is trying to lay down. So that case becomes the most important case. For example, I was giving example of this case only, section 138. So the judgment that they relied on was a case, Anita Harda case was one of the judgments that they solely relied upon, on how section 141 of Negotiable Instrument Act makes even the corporations criminally liable. So it puts a criminal liability on companies also, and which was clearly laid down in Anita Harda case. So in that case, it was laid down, and this case relied on that case. So now that case becomes very important, and that case has been mentioned more than once in the final ratio part also. That case has been mentioned. So now I can identify based on my reading of the judgment that this case becomes more important compared to other cases. They have relied on so many cases, like they have cited like around 50 cases. So I won't be able to memorize all those 50 cases, but this particular Anita Harda case I can memorize because that becomes the sole argument of the case. Do we just need to read the opinion of judges clearly, or we need to kind of, Ritu, you don't need to memorize anything. As far as my opinion is concerned, I don't memorize anything, and my memory is also not very good. I used to rely on revisions, and just whatever I can remember, I will answer, but I never used to try to memorize anything. If it's meant to stay in your mind, it will stay in mind. One thing you can do is write it down, make your notes. That will help you subconsciously memorize things. But other than that, I think you can just try to read the case and not focus too much on memorizing it. It will stay in your mind most probably. Otherwise, with second revision or first revision, it will become like more clear and it will stay in your mind. So if you'll just focus on memorizing everything, then it becomes really hard for you, because then you won't be able to cover a lot of syllabus.
Okay, Sahil, likewise, last year when you are attempting mocks and you are participating in our All India Mock Series, so whenever the discussion with the Mohit sir, with your students, he always tell you about that, what to attempt or what not to attempt. The major strategy, while if you are attempting 120 questions, that will not give you certain success. So please elaborate them to the students that how you make the strategy, what to attempt or what to left during the
Yes, I can definitely relate to that. As Mohit sir told us that you should not attempt the question that you are not certain about, and I followed that approach, and because of which I think I was able to avoid a lot of negative marking in the last year's exam, because last year exam was not that easy. I won't say it was tough, but it was unexpected. So many students were not prepared for this kind of unexpected question, and they attempted a lot of questions, which obviously resulted in negative marking. Because if you are not sure about something, then you are bound to make mistakes. But what I like, there was one question on jurisprudence, which was directly asking that what is the name of this jurist or what is the name of that jurist. I left that question, like 80% of the question, 8 out of 10 I left unattempted, because I was not sure about it. So even if I'm not like I have even if I didn't have a little idea about what is the answer, why should I attempt it? Some people becomes nervous and try to attempt those questions as well. But you can try to score in those questions that you have a fairly good idea about. If you have fairly good idea, good knowledge about a certain question, then you can answer that question and leave the question that you don't have any idea about entirely. So other than that, what basis you can see that if you are sure that two of the options are incorrect, if you are sure about two of the options, then you can take a chance. But if you are unsure about three options, then you should not take a chance. So if there is a 50-50 possibility, you're sure that there is a 50-50 possibility that it can be correct also and it can be wrong also, then you should just attempt it, try your luck. Because sometimes in such kind of objective questions, you have to like sometimes do some guesswork also, but it has to be a smart guesswork. So if you are sure about two options and sure that two of the options are incorrect, and out of these two options one can be correct, then you can go about trying to attempt one of them. But if you are not sure that if either of the option is correct, then you should leave that question entirely. You should not think even twice about it. So there are sometimes they ask you certain sections which you have never read. So instead of trying to guess which is the correct provision, just leave that question and focus on the question that you can be more sure about. What are the areas which one should focus for subjective part as of now? So Manvedra, first of all, I think you should cover the recent changes, recent developments, like whatever becomes more important. For example, there is an issue of farm bills, right? There is an issue of making these vaccines, compulsory licensing of these vaccines. So these are the examples. Recently, Juhi Chawla went to Supreme Court with a petition to ban 5G. I don't know, think that is that important when it comes to subjective answer. But based on these things, there will be a question which is also related to jurisprudence. For example, is I gave you example of compulsory licensing of vaccines, right? So they can mold that question in certain way, like what is the responsibility of a state towards the subjects when it comes to providing proper healthcare. So that kind of question can be asked, and in that case, it becomes your duty to point them towards the recent example of compulsory licensing of vaccine. So when it comes to subjective part, you have to show your legal knowledge also. You have to show your knowledge about the recent and contemporary changes in the legal field also. And also you have to show your knowledge about jurisprudence behind that certain topic, because philosophy is such a wide area. You can put in philosophy everywhere, you can put in jurisprudence everywhere, and also how our constitution provides the rights and obligations, rights and duties in that areas. What are the duties of the citizen, what is the obligation of the state, what is the jurisprudential reasoning behind it, what is the objective behind saying that there should be a compulsory licensing. You have to balance the interest of the capitalist also, who wants to gain a profit, who you have to see that how giving incentives to the vaccine makers can actually enhance the vaccination process, because if they won't get enough incentive, why will they do this R&D work, research and development work, and try to come up with a vaccine? But at the same time, you have to see the interest of the stakeholders, also the citizens who need vaccination on wide scale. So you need to balance the interest of both these parties. With compulsory licensing, you are ignoring the interest of these pharma industries who are putting in their research and development. But if you are not doing the compulsory licensing, then you are ignoring the the wide scale need of the citizens to get vaccinated. So what is the balanced approach that you can think, Manvedra, in that case? How should legally you can go about it and make sure that interest of both the parties can be satisfied? So you need to make that kind of argument in your essay, but at the same time you have to show them that you have sufficient knowledge about the legal provisions that cover this area, you know, the provisions of compulsory licensing also in case of patents, you know about the jurisprudence behind it, as I told you, the problems of anti-commons and commons, everything about that, and you know about the constitutional protection that is given to our citizens. And in the end of the day, you are just making a coherent argument and and coming to a balanced and the most harmonized approach. So that is how you write your essay, and that is how you showcase that you have knowledge and also the analytical skill to make a good argument.
Thank you so much, Sahil, for this. And any other questions, guys? Then we will conclude this session.
One other thing, sir, I would like to say is that as I was also mentioning earlier, that during this time of the pandemic, the things are becoming more depressing. We are getting news of our dear ones getting affected by it and getting sick because of the pandemic. So at that time, if you think that you are not being able to study because of that mental pressure, then it's okay to be that way. It's okay to not be mentally sound enough to start studying right away and ignoring everything else. Just take a break. And you can talk to people, you can talk to me, you can talk to your mentors, and you can talk to your friends, colleagues and family, everyone. Just firstly focus on the getting to that mental stability, and then you should restart your preparation with full swing. When you think that you're stable enough, then you should just directly put your car in the 5th gear and start studying. But it's okay for you to not being able to study all the time. It's fine. Don't take the mental pressure as in if you're lagging behind just because you're not being able to study right now and other people are studying. That does not mean that you will lag behind. It's focus on your mental health also, physical well-being also, and only after that you should approach with the studies.
So thank you, Sahil. So guys, let's conclude this session, and we will connect again with Sahil and for his insights. Okay, thank you so much, Sahil. Thank you, guys.